Hello everyone. In this tutorial I will explain to you a little bit about the nested loops. As we have learned before, we have studied about the different kind of loops where we can actually iterate over a group of items in order to produce just one single loop. But in this topic we are just taking that that basic information little bit further into more details, and um, we create, we will have some scenario whereby we have a loop inside a loop. A loop happens to be inside another loop. It is just simply as the nested if statement and whatever, logic we have taken before. So this is the kind of nested loop. So a nested loop is defined as a loop inside a body of another loop. So example here, you can just take a look at this, and later on I will explain to you one by one. How this loop, how the mechanics of this loop is actually working off. All right, so for the first loop here, we have one iterator here starting from 1 to 3, and then it's updating itself. And then within the body of it, we have another loop here. So what does this mean? This means that when, for each value of row here, for each value of the iteration row here, we will be having another loop that it will completely iterate. It will complete iterate, meaning that we will be having a loop iterates for 3 times for every value of row. So, and then when row goes to 2 here again, so another 3 loop, another loop of 3 times iteration will come inside. So 3 by 3 by 3, so that will be accumulating to the end. So all right, so in this example, it actually shows just a simple example of multiplying rows and columns. So it is just to display the the number of rows and columns. So if you have just taken this example just to show you that to bring you more understanding of of that implementation, assume of course we need to here initialize each of these counters. All right, so if we have just run the code here, we will be let me just run the code simply without any modifications. All right, so this is what we will be having here. Okay, so it will be iterating different, over different number of 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6. Here this is just a multiplication, by the way, it's not just a count. Okay, so we are multiplying rows by columns, okay. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 3. Anyway, this is this kind of output is actually dumb enough. It's a kind of a dumb output, meaning that it's meaningless. There is no scenario in the real life that may bring you to to have such an output. But at least this will reflect that there is a loop, a nested loop, and it can produces the output. But let's just imagine this. Imagine that if I want you to produce the for example 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 again here and again here. You see, this kind of pattern you may have. You may have some scenarios or some questions that might ask you about I want you to produce me this kind of output. So you have this output. I want you to produce the the code that relates to it. All right, so yeah, this can actually make a kind of sense. So in this case, we need to notice something here, and let me just reflect you. Refer you back. To give the the more information here. So here, the first loop here should be for the row, not only in this example but in every single example. So the first loop here should be the number of rows. So meaning that how many rows we have in this example, we'll be having about 1 2 3 1 2 3 4. So we'll be having 4 rows. So meaning that we are accumulating, or we are counting over 4 rows. And then the second one, the inner loop, it should count for the number of columns. So the number of columns here, that how many items, the number of times that the item will be printed here. So each time the item is printed here, it forms one column. It forms one column each time it's printed. So here we have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. All right, so coming back to our question, to our Visual Studio. So let me just use that, or actually I can. All right, so we'll copy that again. Int x Let me just write it row to make it more informative. Int row equal to 1, row less than or equal to 4, row plus plus. And here I have my first loop, and then the inner loop here should goes like typically the same. Int column equal to 1, column less than or equal to, how many columns do we have? We should have 7 columns, and then col plus plus. That should be actually sticking to the variable name. And then this is the parentheses for the for the inner loop. So inside that loop, all I need to do is just count cout, and I'll be printing just a star, because this is the shape that I'm going to produce here. So don't be surprised, it's just a star, so I can just print it as a text here. And then I will just simply delete it, end these statements here. Okay, so what I will do here again, in order to make sure that I'm just splitting the number of pattern here, or let me just, in the beginning, let me just execute this code, and I will show you why do I need to do that coming modification. Here you go. See, it seems that, oh yeah, so there's nothing, how come we have this shape here and we want to, what we have is just one line of code, one line of output. Why is that happening? It is because we are not actually enforcing the each iteration, we are not enforcing each row after completing one full set of 7 stars to be breakout, or to start a new line. So starting a new line, as you know and as you have taken before, so it's just by writing simply in line. Okay, so just type, putting this piece of code here, it will actually enforce that after each loop, after each for loop, after each inner for loop, to be particularly saying, we will start a new line. After each inner loop, we'll be starting a new line. All right, so if we just again compile this, there you go. So this is what you'll have here. After each for loop, so each one here, each 7 stars here represents an inner for loop. And the outer 7 stars, the outer loop here represents what? It represents how many rows do we have? How many, times do we need to print 7 stars? How many times do we need to print that inner loop here? How many times do we need to go for an inner loop execution? This is the inner loop. All right. I hope this has been informative, and I think this is the basic example and the most, simple example that may show the, the importance of the nested loop. All right. So coming back to our slides. Here again, as you know, we call it outer loop, and we call it inner loop. So inside the inner loop, it is not only about printing out. It may have, again, any kind of statement. It may have a formula statement, may have initialization, and as you know, this is just a block of code, so you can type whatever code you want here. All right, so there are some notes to notice here. Inner loop here, as I mentioned to you, it goes through all the repetitions for each repetition of outer loop. So meaning that inner loop will have much more repetitions, meaning that inner loop repetitions complete sooner than the outer loop, because for each for each item in the outer loop here, we will have a full loop of the inner loop. I think this should be clear to you. All right, so the total number of repetitions here, if I told you how many repetitions should this statement be compiled, how many repetitions should this statement be compiled? Any statement that happened to be within the scope of the inner loop, if there is any output statement or any cout statement, it will compile according to a number of repetitions that will be a result of multiplication of the size of each loop. Meaning, so the size of this loop is 3, and the size of the outer loop is 3. So the number of times that this cout will be implemented, or this cout will be executed, it will be 3 multiplied by 3. If we have row equal to 4, it will be 4 multiplied by 3. In our example here, if I tell you how many times, how many times the total repetitions of this code, that should be the number of columns here, which is the inner loop, multiplied by the number of rows. So number of rows will be 1, 2, 3, 4 multiplied by 7. That will accumulate to 28. Okay, so that should be clear. Um, and commonly, this kind of loop, and I mean, like this kind of nested loop is commonly being used for the for loop. So I mean, like it's rarely used. I mean, like you can rarely see that there is a code which includes like a while inside a while, or like I mean, like a do while inside a do while. Yeah, you make. I mean, like you may see a for inside. I mean, like a while inside a for loop, but like the most common use of nested loops here to say in practice, it is just a for inside for loop. It's like two for loop inside each other. So this is like the most practical thing that you can see. Examples. So okay, so since this can, I mean, like this kind of loop can be, I mean, like not really well common, and especially when you think of the real world examples, what kind of examples that may reflect a nested loop here? So you can, take these, I mean, like take these scenarios that, I mean, like these 3 points here as some examples. Like for example, when we want to loop for a list of courses for a number of students. So you see here, you have a list of courses. Let's say like you have student A, and student A have math, and he has also physics, and has also English, for example. Okay, and student B, and student C, and so on and so forth. Okay, and student Z until the end. Okay, so each of which will have like a different maybe different or same courses. You may need to also score, I mean, like to print out or calculate their scores. So this will go to the, I mean, like to the end. So at the end you will find yourself as writing, I mean, like you'll find yourself typing a matrix, I mean, like so you're finding yourself typing a matrix of like rows and columns here. So this is, I mean, like can be like one of the examples. Another example here, you can see the loop, I mean, like a loop to represent or like to I mean, like model the number of employees maybe in several departments. Let's say like in one department of computer science, or like our SEAMS college here. So we have like the information system department, we have accounting, we have management. So how many, or like list the names of employees in each department. So we have like several department, and inside each department we'll be having, I mean, number of items or number of employees, maybe number of courses. Okay, so calculate the sum or average for a scores, I mean, like for courses scores. Let's say we are actually calculating students, as we say here, students are having like different, I mean, like some courses, and they achieve their scores in the final exam maybe, or in any of their assessments. So you want to calculate the sum of the courses for each student. So accumulating maybe up to, for example, 6 or 7 students, or maybe the whole class to be like 30 or 40 students. So in this case, yes, this is, and like could be like one of the implementation in the nested for loop. All right, so you can refer back actually to that program number 5-13 in the textbook, and let me just go through it with you here. So this is it. So this is actually a clear representation of like the for loop. Um, I will just explain it to you as it is here. I do not need to go and put it in the Visual Studio. You can just do that, and you can try it and discover, I mean, like the execution of the code, so that you can get something like this result. All right, so at the beginning here, you can see the program starting by name, and then int students, so defining a number of students, so different variables here, one variable to store the number of students, and then the number of tests, and then one variable here is to store the average. By the way, the result, or like the purpose of this program, it is to calculate the average score for a number of students who have, where each student has a number of different courses. So first we get the number of students by prompting the student to enter how many, I mean like how many students are there. So we need to get the number of students. So then the user will enter the number of students, could be 10, 20, whatever number. And then we get the number of test scores per student. So how many test scores does the student have? So here we have the number of tests, okay? And then it can be stored, also read by the user. And then here we start our for loop. This is the important part now. So we start our for loop. So this is the student number. We are actually iterating or like rounding, making a loop over the number of students. So this is the upper loop, I mean like the upper bound, starting from number equal to 1 until number equal to whatever value that the user have entered here. And then also we have another loop for the number of tests. So the test, maybe the test for course 1, test for course 2. So here starting for the different number of tests. So inside this test here, we define a variable here. It's called score. Okay, so now we want to read the score. So meaning that after the student, I mean like after the user enters the number of students and then the number of tests, so we make a loop. So we take these two variables as the total number of iterations for each loop. So because we want to iterate, I mean like we want to iterate the number of courses for students, that's why we have to have this one. We have to have the student number of students as the outer loop. We cannot have it the inner loop. Why? It is because one student may have different courses, but different courses, or like one course may not have, I mean like, okay, it may have different students, but the logic here, it is to, I mean like the question or the logic here, it is to calculate the average of courses for one student. All right. That's why we will have like the number of students or like the iteration or item student will be represented as the outer loop item, because each student will have different courses, and then we will need to calculate the average for these courses. Okay, so now we ask the student to enter the number, I mean like the score for each of the tests that he have here. Then the student enter I mean like the score, and then directly we are calculating the total here. It's just a keep running total here, if you remember this. So here we end I mean like the inner loop, and then we go again and calculate the average, because here it should be at the end, I mean like out of the inner loop. Inner loop here meaning that we are actually here, it is to this is to it should go I mean like a student by a student for each student. Okay, so it should go for each student actually here. So any inner loop here, it should go for each student. So here we should calculate the average at the outside the inner loop here, because of course after we finish entering the scores for one student, so each loop here, I mean like each loop here should be representing one student. For each student courses, we calculate, you can just do, I mean like the average here. So the inner loop, again here I'm saying the inner loop here, it represents the total number of courses for the students, I mean like whatever courses that the students is having. And here the students is reading or inputting his scores. So outside that inner loop, we want to calculate the average, okay, which is the total over the number of tests. Okay, and then we simply print out the average within the outer loop. So this is the parenthesis here for the outer loop. So we still within here, we are still within the outer loop. So meaning that how many times this statement will be printed out, it will be printed out for the number of students. It depends on the number of students that the user have entered. So for example, if the user have entered 2 for the number of students as a response to this variable here, then this statement, I mean like we will be having two different averages here. As you can see, average 1 and then average 2. It depends on each student. That's why here you can see from the output, you can have a good imagination of how is this. So first, the user have entered the number of students, and then how many scores do the students he wants to calculate? He want to calculate 3. And then now we loop for each one. So the student, I mean like for each one student, or for each student, so we need to read 3 courses. So we need to read three scores. So 3 different scores here, and then we calculate the average for the first student, and then we read another 3 scores for the second student, and then we calculate the average here. All right. So this is an explanation, and this is kind of actually a good example. Even I really urge you to go through it and really understand it, because even your later assessments, it will be like within the scope of that example. All right. So breaking out of the loop, there is actually one statement here, or like one word here. Keyword is kind of it is used actually to break or to enforce the loop to break down. We don't need to accumulate. Let's say for example here, let me just make this an action for you. That would be much better. Okay, so I will just type this as an X. I do not want to use the same um, variable name. So here, if we see out x, I just want to see out the counter itself. So if we see out x and then enter, and I mean like allowing a little space in the horizontal way. So if we run that, this is what should we expect, because we are actually counting from 1 to 4. So 1 2 3 4. All right, let's just extend this counter to be, let's say for example 10, to make it to bring a clearer picture of what we are going to do now. So now 1 2 3 4 5 until 10. All right, so I can use a break loop here in order to indicate something under a certain condition. In order to enforce the loop to finish or to break out under a certain condition. For example, here I'm saying if x, I'm having a condition here. So if x is equal for, for example, if x is less than or like greater than or equal, great. If x is greater than or equal 5 or 6, 7, let's say, then do that break. Just type this word. All right, and actually that condition should be before the printing out. Why? It is because we want to print out, but following a certain following a certain condition. Let me just remind you that of course we need to use the parentheses. Although we have only one statement here, but as I told you, I really advise you to use parentheses everywhere. Anywhere and anytime. So this will indicate that even now here, so whatever this statement now, it's located under a condition, so it cannot be executed if this condition is false. So only if this condition is true, it will be executed, and this is what we will see. So just now we have been seeing that we're able to print from 1 to 10, right? And here, what this code will print is that it will print only from 1 to 7, as you will see here. Sorry, from 1 to 6, because here it's less than or equal. If we remove the equalization here, we will be including 7. All right, so see, in this case, we have like the iterator here. If the iterator comes to be 7, so is x greater than 7? No, so it will print 7 here. And then x became 8 here, updating x became 8. So is x, is 8 greater than 7? Yes, so it's, it triggers this keyword, which is a break, and then it actually gets out of the loop here. So if we have any kind of, if we have like a C out here that says, for example, any text here, hello, for example, and then okay, let me just break for a new line here. I just want to make sure that end line is coming here, because I do not want the hello to be printed here. All right, so if if I press enter here, so after 7 it will be printed out. If I do not have that, that condition, assume that I just commented that condition here, and then what I will see here, I'll be having a full iteration and then the word hello. All right, so this is the importance of having a break. It's very simple and very straightforward to be to be used. All right, so of course, so making there's one note here, is that by the too much of using breaks keyword, of course it makes the code harder to understand and even more complicated. It is used in an inner loop to terminate the loop only and returns to the outer loop. So for example here, this is another example. So it can be used actually in nested loop and the loop itself. All right, so if we have used it here, we can actually terminate the loop and then start again, a new iteration here. All right, so this is just like one example to say how can we draw here the number of rows here. But this kind of example is not really important, it's not really popular, but I just want you to focus here, having the the effect of break here. It makes star, when star equal to 10, then number of starting from 0 to 10, so meaning that 11 number of columns, so 11 different columns here. So if you count these, you'll find these that they are 11. So after printing 11 columns here, and then star will equal to 10, so it will break the inner loop. The inner loop, as we have said, it's just for the number of columns here. So we will be stopping after 11 and then starting a new row, as we have seen here. So this is outer for the row, and then again when star equals to 10, after printing 11 stars, it will start a new row, as you can see here, and so on and so forth. All right, so this is the continue statement. Now it is the opposite, or actually it's not opposite to say, it is just something, I mean, like, it's one keyword. This is one keyword similar, I mean, like, that can do something related to the break, or something like um, similar to the break, but this is like more peaceful, or like more softer than the break. The break, it will automatically, like, completely break out of the loop, but continue, it will just skip that current iteration and then go to the other iteration. It doesn't end the whole loop. The whole loop will be iterated, but it will skip the iteration. So that's why if there is a code within the iteration, within each iteration that has not been executed, it will skip it and go for the other iteration. All right, so here you can see that. So here, take this example. So imagine that we have int, this is a variable name, and we can actually increase the variable name here, either here or like in any place in the code. Let me just type it for you, much easier. So int num equal to 0. Here I want to have while loop, for example, because yeah, this is also another point. So both break and continue, they can be actually both used for any kind of loop, either do while, for. So that should has no restrictions to use all of them, and their implementation all is the same. It doesn't matter what kind of loop we are using here. So num less than 10, here num plus plus, and now here cout num, then cout num space, okay, and then num plus plus. All right, so this is that. And oh yeah, here we've forgotten that there's a very important notation here. It should be taken care of. Okay, so here again, so continue, because also break its condition. I mean, like, it's usually when we practice or when we want to implement break, we put it in a condition, as we have said before. Same for, I mean, like, same goes for the continue. So it's usually being implemented under a certain condition. So we need to put it in if condition. If num, for example, here we want to say is greater than or equal to, say, 5, then do me this. Okay, continue. Okay, this is it, and there you go. So that actually should be here down. It should be down. Okay, all right, so if we have triggered that, I mean, like, if we have executed the code now, let's see what's going on here. So 1 2 3 4. Okay, so it's because, yeah, we're unable to increase the number here. So yeah, it should actually be used. So either we can put it like this, because the iteration here is down. So let me just try this again. Reflecting the same code. So this is less than num less than, while num less than 10. So that should be if. Yeah, there's actually, this is the point here. My point here is, this is the one, is that I num equal plus plus. This is num plus plus as the same counter here. But what I will do here is that instead of having maximum, I mean, like, greater than or less than, I'll just put it as a equalization. I want to skip number 5 actually. Actually, the logic that we have printed just now, this is correct. It has nothing wrong with it. But I'm just trying to imitate what is the, I mean, like as the output in here. Okay, so if we continue running this, there you go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It seems that this is actually from 1 to 10, but if you focus here, 1, 2, 3, 4, where is 5? There's nothing related to 5 here. So 5 is not being printed here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is actually one like, it seems that, okay, so if in this condition, if we have num equal to that certain, I mean like if the value of num here comes to be 5, then continue, meaning that skip the rest of code, whatever code here, even if we want to say see out here a new this is iteration number, and say to make it more num here. Okay, so we can just make it like this in line to be like more clear. All right, so if we run this code now, see if this is iteration number 1, 2, 3, 4. Where is 6? 6 is not here. 6 is not here. Of course, because they're actually printing the, I mean, like the number 2 times. Of course, it's being printed 2 times. That's why you can see here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. So this is like one example. Or you can also you can just put it if number is less than or equal, is greater than or equal. So when the number is greater than 5, then continue. Okay, so it will be printed here up to 4. All right, what about this code? So it's not being printed. Why? It's because when this condition has been satisfied, and this condition actually lies, again, as I'm telling you, it's much better to put it within the if statement, because this condition happened to be satisfied. So now number each time will be greater than or I mean like after 5, I mean like after 4. So number, I mean like this condition will be true all the time, and then as long as the condition is true, so this whatever code here, the rest of the loop, so this is the loop, the rest of the loop here will be skipped. It will not be executed. It's because we have this continue here, and I mean like it has been brought to us. All right, so with this is the end of our I mean like our tutorial. You can just review the slide notes here. If you have any question, you can just ask me through the email, or you just can contact me. Well, with that, thank you for watching, and I will see you in another lesson. Thank you.